Hey everyone, welcome to the Wheels Walking Podcast, a podcast with a guy in a wheelchair and a guy not in a wheelchair.
What up?
So on today's bonus episode is going to be something a little bit special. I'm going to be taking over the format of the Andrew Deitch podcast, and I'm going to be interviewing Andrew the same way that he's interviewed me multiple times and the way that he's interviewed other people hundreds of times. So if you don't know much about Andrew's podcast, it's about having meaningful conversations with interesting people. And, you know, my guest today is Andrew Deitch. Andrew Deitch
Wait,
is...
you have to say, hey everybody, welcome to episode 1 of the Richard Corbett podcast.
Okay, and then what do I say after that?
And then you're just like, I hope you guys are having a great day. I've got an awesome guest for you guys today. That's how I always started off the podcast.
All right, here we go.
If we're doing it in true podcast format.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the Richard Corbett podcast. I hope you're having just a great day today as the sound of my voice comes through your ears, and I hope you're just so thrilled and so excited to learn more about my very special guest today. I've known Andrew for a couple of years, and Andrew's one of these people that is very mysterious and very unique if you don't know him, but if you do know him, he's one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He is an absolute visionary. He is a talented, creative, and a genius marketer. He always puts himself in the mind of the consumer when he's always creating his products. And I think that's just really special and really cool. I've had the privilege of knowing Andrew for a long time, and you guys have had the privilege of knowing Andrew for a long time, but you've never had the privilege of actually sitting down and having a full conversation, top to bottom, with Andrew. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
That was pretty good. I like how you said I was mysterious.
Yo, because you can be sometimes. Like you have a really cool online presence.
That's kind of funny. I don't really see myself as mysterious, but I guess I could be seen as mysterious. I don't put everything out there.
Yeah, you don't put everything out there, and your online presence is highly curated. Like your online presence is very specialized, especially on your main Instagram and on your podcast. It's very curated, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that leaves lots of questions. You know, who is Andrew Deitch? Why is Andrew Deitch? You know, everything we want to know about Andrew. So
I just realized you have both headphones on, don't you?
No, I don't.
Oh, just kidding. I was like, it sounds different on my end, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But yeah,
I'll do the goofy ear move again.
Someone commented, I bet Richard's ear hurts.
It doesn't hurt too bad. I'll let everyone know if it does hurt.
Yeah, but
all right. So Andrew, let's take
funny.
It back.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a little bit mysterious in that regard, but I guess I don't view myself as that because I used to be like so. Like especially on Snapchat and stuff, I used to put my stuff out there like so much about like my everyday life and whatever. So I guess I kind of still view myself as that, but recently I've been more behind the scenes on a lot of things. So I could see how I'm a little more mysterious. But I think if you really pay attention and like listen to all my podcasts and stuff, you'd be able to like really get to know me quickly. So I think in that regard, I'm not very mysterious. Like if you just took the time to listen to, I mean, you'd have to take a lot of time, but if you took the weeks of literally straight weeks of audio listening time to get to know me, you could get to know me fairly well. You could probably know me more than the vast majority of people, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel similar with this podcast. Like I am in the face of everyone, but there's still so much more to me, and that's why I like the podcast so much, is because there is quite literally a different side of myself that people I love. I'm sure you've received this sometimes where you meet someone in real life and all they know you from is from online, and they go, "Oh, you're totally not what I was expecting," but like in a good way.
Yeah, most of the time it's people that have listened to my podcast, but I think the people that listen to my podcast do know me pretty well, so it is kind of different in that way. But yeah.
All right, so let's take it back to the beginning. Let's take it back to the early days, of Andrew Deitch. Now we don't have to start with the first memory, but I always think that's.
And I was like, "What's up, world?"
But I always think that's interesting. What someone's first memory or first couple of memories of their life are. So
I don't
what are
really
some
know.
of your first memories?
I don't really know what my first memories are. I can like remember my brother being born and stuff like that vaguely. So I was like 4 at the time, 3.5 or so. I remember like I don't really remember much before my brother, but I probably do, but it's just like so vague that it's not put in context for me. But I can remember when my brother was like an infant, like a little bit, like when my mom came home with him. I was staying at my grandparents' house while my parents were at the hospital having my brother, and yeah, I guess my life was like kind of at that point just defined by like being an older brother a little bit, I guess, because me and my brother were homeschooled. That's something that we both share. And so I spent a lot of time at home with my mom and my brother. And, yeah, I think a lot of my earliest memories are just, hanging out at home and my neighborhood that I was in. I had a couple of friends that I, hung out with on a regular basis, but not that much. Like I didn't have like tons of friends early on. It was just a couple of neighborhood kids and me and my brother, and then maybe some kids from church and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a pretty like it was a good childhood. I mean, but like I said, we were homeschooled, so that was like the most, I guess, interesting thing. And also grew up very religious. That was another thing that was like super influential on me. And I think that both of us are similar in that way.
Yeah, a lot of people that go down the homeschool route usually have some type of like religiousness to them.
Yeah,
there
probably.
are some people that are homeschooled that aren't religious, but I know I've definitely seen that. What would you say has been your like? What was your fondest memory of being homeschooled growing up? And I'll also ask the same question of like, what was your fondest memory of like growing up religious and growing up in the church? Because I know for me, like I'm not a religious person at all any longer, but I still have fond memories of being growing up in those environments. And since they kind of go parallel, that's why I kind of mashed the questions together. What was
I think fondest memories of being homeschooled. So we were in a homeschool group at like a certain point. We kind of joined this like homeschool collective or whatever you want to call it. And it was just it was a group of homeschool kids that we would all, once a week or whatever, we'd all convene and hang out. And it was all different ages. It wasn't like all the 4th graders would hang out. You would hang out with everybody. So we'd hang out with younger kids, older kids, and we'd all meet up at someone's house for that week or whatever. And then the next week we'd meet up at someone else's house. Maybe it was once a month actually with that. I don't remember, but it was cool because we would go on like field trips with them. So that was kind of cool. We were able to, like, the parents were able to kind of collectively approach different places and say, hey, we're a homeschool group. We want to do a field trip here or whatever. Versus if you're not in one of those groups, it'd probably be a lot harder to get like a field trip organized to go somewhere. I mean, it wouldn't even necessarily be a field trip. It would just be like going on a trip with your mom. It's like going to the museum or something. It's not really like a real field trip. So
I remember one time we went to like a Wonder Bread factory, and that stuck in my head. It was a small group of us, but we got to see how bread got made, and that was pretty cool.
Exactly. Like I remember going to like Mayfield dairy farms where you got to see like cows getting milked and shit, and like like very similar things to that. You go to like factories or you go to a museum together. I remember one time we went to this one museum and they gave this one mom something in her mouth that made her like breathe like smoke or vapor or something. And I was like, holy shit, this mom is like smoking right now. This is crazy. Like it like blew my mind that this like Christian mom was like quote unquote smoking something. It was so funny. And I was like so jealous because I was like, oh, I want to do that. It's cool. But
were you ever allowed to buy those candy cigarettes as a kid?
I think I had those like at Halloween sometimes, but the one thing I used to do was smoke Smarties. Did you ever do that where you could grind up Smarties? Oh my gosh. Okay, so Smarties, I mean, they're very they're fine powder, like, and they're just like pressed. Like it's basically just like a pressed candy. And
like a
it's
Tums
just like,
almost.
Exactly. And very similar. And you can grind them up. If you take them in the package, you kind of like loosen the package and you like kind of do this and push the Smarties against each other and grind them together. They turn into like a powder. And then eventually you can kind of like flick, like you unscrew one of the ends of it, and you kind of like flick it while you inhale, and you can breathe in like Smartie grounds and breathe it out, and it looks like smoke.
Oh
and,
my gosh.
that was more like in middle school and stuff when I would do that. AJ, did you ever smoke Smarties?
I do remember smoking Smarties, and I remember how lame it was.
I always thought it was so fun. And I remember one time Miss Grabencourt at Perimeter, she got really mad at everyone because we were all like smoking Smarties in her class.
That's an irresponsible decision.
Yeah, she's like, quit it, cut it out. It was pretty funny. But anyways.
I remember once I was dared to snort the powder that was left over at the bottom of a sour Skittles bag, and
oh God,
I did it. I was always a showman. That was one of the things that like a lot of people will tell you growing up. I was very much a showman. It was like if you were gonna dare anyone to do anything, it was gonna be me, and I would have done it, even to my own detriment. And there was a couple of times where I'd hurt myself, but
yeah, I would do that sometimes too. Like. I wasn't ever reckless with my body though. I was always such a pussy when it came to that type of stuff. Like I didn't want to like do any like reckless like skateboarding tricks or anything. Like I was always afraid of getting hurt, I guess. But like if it was like eating a bug or like some shit like that, I was always down.
Yeah, like I think we were probably influenced by the Jackass movies. Like I know they would always say like don't attempt these stunts, but come on, we're gonna copy things we see on TV.
I didn't ever get to watch those until later on. Like I was so like sheltered from that kind of stuff too. So like early on, I didn't get to see any of that. So I think by the time I saw it, I was probably like in high school and stuff.
I remember you had to like sneak to go watch those kind of movies. Like,
yeah.
You would be like, dude, there's this one scene from Jackass. I remember I got in trouble for talking about Jackass.
Even just talking about it because it says ass.
Yeah.
even though in the Bible Jesus rides into town on an ass. So
yes, but that's out of different context now, Richard.
Yeah. Speaking of, growing up religious, what were some of your fondest memories of that? Was it like a vacation Bible school or a kids camp or like friends? Or what was your favorite thing?
Yeah, I mean, I did everything. My whole life revolved around church, to be honest, because so I was homeschooled until 4th grade, and then in 4th grade I went to the school that was part of my church, and AJ actually went there too. That's kind of how we were connected, anyways. But he's a few years younger than me, so we didn't know. But I knew his older brother. But anyways, we went to this private school that was part of the church. So literally from 4th grade until 8th grade, I was at church 6 days out of the week, because I was there Monday through Friday and then also on Sunday for church. So like literally every single day of the week except for Saturday. And even sometimes on Saturday, I was at the church. And, in the summer, I'd always go to church camps and stuff like that, whether it was the camp at my church or it was another type of church camp that, had sleepover type stuff. Like I was very heavily involved in church. So it's kind of hard to even separate like church from my childhood because it was so intertwined. But I guess, yeah, just like the things that stick out to me the most about, where you draw the line about childhood anyways. But yeah, just like my church small group friends and just getting into shenanigans. And, that's, it was all through my prepubescent all the way to high school days was that. So it's like, I have so many like fond memories about, friends and getting into trouble and doing all kinds of stuff. I even like, I think I told it on our podcast a couple weeks ago about, the TPing story where I was like going out and toilet papering houses. That was with like the guys in my discipleship group or whatever at church. So it was just kind of, it was fun.
Yeah, I think the two things that I found the most interesting were church camps and Wednesday nights in the summer. Wednesday night in the summer, because after it was over, you could always go over to your friend's house and watch movies, jump on the trampoline, cook out, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I liked summer church camp because it was basically like a week away with your friends, and you could take the religious part as serious or not serious as you wanted, and that was always what I appreciated.
We had a thing at our church called Gold Rush. That was always super fun because it was just like all these other churches would come to our church. So like our church hosted it. And so we'd get all these churches that came to it, and we'd always be super stoked to like meet all these new kids and new girls and, blah, blah, blah.
Girls, yes. Yo, I remember growing up, one of my youth pastors told me, he goes, you guys might not believe this, but the success to all youth groups is attractive girls. And we were all joking, laughing, like, what do you mean?
Lie.
He goes, I go, what do you mean? He goes, no, seriously. He goes, if you got cute girls in your youth group, more boys want to come. And if more boys come, more girls want to come. And before you know it, everyone's there to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but then you just trick them and teach them about Jesus.
100% accurate, dude. That is 100% accurate. Because I remember even at one point at my church, like, all the kids wanted to go to this one other youth group.
Because that's where all the hot girls were.
And it was 100% true. It's because that's where all the hot girls were. Is very true. Real hot girl shit.
That's funny that happened. So what about your adolescent years a little bit further on, like moving on into like junior high
I think
and
the
high
other
school?
the other big thing was Scouts. So I started Scouts in like 5th grade, Boy Scouts. And that's another thing that we share. So Boy Scouts was like a really big aspect of that too, because it was kind of funny because a lot of the kids that I was homeschooled with were also in Scouts, but by that point I wasn't homeschooled anymore. So I knew a lot of those homeschool kids already, and then I also knew a lot of the kids from school in Scouts too, because also my Scout troop was based out of my church as well. So that was another aspect of my life that was built out of that same church. So it is another layer. Tuesday nights was when we had Scout meetings. So even on Tuesday nights I was at church even longer, and then on the weekends, Saturdays, sometimes I was at church because we'd do our campouts or like we'd have a thing on Saturday or whatever. So like literally when I tell you like church was like my life, it really kind of was. And but Scouts I would say was something that I've definitely taken for granted, but in recent years I've come to appreciate a lot, just because there were so many things that I learned in Boy Scouts that I don't even really realize why I know these things. And then I'm like, why don't other people know this? And then I'm like,
Scouts.
Oh, because I learned it in Scouts. Like, I just think that this is like common knowledge to everyone. Like, oh yeah, you learn that when you're younger, but it's totally not true. Like lots of leadership stuff, lots of even like cooking stuff and like cleanliness and, all kinds of stuff is very, very integral to Scouts. I mean, you look at their core values, and unfortunately Scouts has deteriorated quite a bit in the past few years, and that makes me really sad. Mainly because
I don't know if they've deteriorated more or if they've just got a bad rap. Like,
they've deteriorated a lot, and they've lost a lot of money and a lot of funding and a lot of public image, unfortunately. And
yeah, I think it started out when they came out publicly about they said like no gays and no girls, basically. When they
said no gays and no girls, and then they redacted that, and then they said, okay, fine, gays, fine, girls, and then they said, okay, fine, you can, and they basically just had a lot of pressure from like the progressive side of things, and unfortunately a lot of Scout troops are very, very religious, and so a lot of
they're more conservative. Yeah,
and a lot of I know in like the Mormon faith, actually Scouts is like pretty integral. Like pretty much all boys that are Mormon, or I think it's Mormon, are involved in Boy Scouts. I'm pretty sure it's Mormon.
Wouldn't surprise me.
And so when that happened,
I'll fact check it.
Yeah, when that happened, like Mormons pretty much had to be like, I guess we're not doing Scouts anymore because it went against their religion. And unfortunately, yeah, they've done a lot of things. And that was the other weird thing, is like once they started allowing girls, because then the Girl Scouts were like, well, what are we here for? And it's like, well, Girl Scouts is very different than Boy Scouts. And then it's like, well, now boys are allowed in Girl Scouts and girls are allowed in Boy Scouts. And then it's just like nothing matters anymore. It was like, it became so inclusive that it was like Boy Scouts was special for these reasons, and then it stopped being special. Excuse me. And so, yeah, I don't, yeah, it's just really sad to see the deterioration of it. And they've lost lots of funding. They've lost, just people aren't even joining Scouts anymore. That's the thing. Like lots of troops are disbanding. Lots of troops, again, were founded in out of churches. And so when these rules came into place, a lot of churches even said like, hey, you guys are cool to still be a troop, but like we can't host you anymore as at this location for free or for cheap or whatever anymore. And so a lot of troops had to disband because they literally didn't even have a place to meet anymore. And that's just really sad.
I think there's also, I personally never experienced this, and I don't know anyone else who has personally experienced this, but that doesn't mean I'm saying it's not true. However, there's a lot of lawsuits and a lot of rumor about a lot of like sexual deviancy.
Lots of predatory
about
behavior, for sure.
A lot of predatory behavior, scout leaders taking advantage of the younger kids taking advantage of other kids, older kids taking advantage of the younger kids. Like, and it really breaks my heart because Scouts is now bankrupt and has a bunch of assets, and a lot of people are suing after it. And it's like, dude, that sucks because like I remember growing up and thinking about like I was proud to put Boy Scouts on my resume. Like putting down that I was an Eagle Scout on my resume was like, yeah, these people are gonna know I'm tough and I'm a good worker and I'm smart and I'm trained. But now it's kind of like, I mean, I'll let people know I'm an Eagle Scout because I am one and I'm proud I am one. But there's just a lot of weird, like, it's kind of like saying you're Catholic these days. It's like, oh, if you say you're Catholic, that means you're a pedophile. And it's like, no.
Or you support it. It's like maybe you're not a pedophile, but like how prevalent that is inside of the Catholic faith, unfortunately. I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of Catholics all around the world that are not involved in that at all. Same thing with Boy Scouts. Like you said, I never experienced any sort of predatory behavior in my troop. Everyone that I interacted with was very awesome. Like, all the adult leaders were great. It was a very healthy troop, and some scout troops did allow moms to get involved. Our troop didn't allow moms to get involved, really.
Same. We didn't
you
allow
could get
them either,
involved,
yeah.
but not to the point of like going on trips with us and things like that. You could be involved, but pretty much it was mostly dads, and I'd say the vast majority of all the dads involved in scouts were really awesome, and I learned a lot from them, and to this day I look up to them as a lot of leaders. What were you going to say, AJ?
So from what I've just looking at the search, a lot of the Mormons have just pulled out boys out of the Boy Scouts because they just don't agree with their new beliefs now. So
and I know also the troop that I was involved with, they are no longer a Boy Scout troop, and there's actually another organization that got formed around that first instance of what you were talking about, Richard, when they kind of like started to go down that path of like, okay, fine, we will allow gay scout leaders and things like that. There was another organization founded called Trail Life USA, and it's very, very similar to Boy Scouts, very, very similar to the core values. They still do all the same things, and actually a lot of Boy Scout troops have converted to Trail Life troops. And so that's actually how my Boy Scout troop is able to still operate as a troop, but they are no longer affiliated with Boy Scouts of America. They are Trail Life USA, which is pretty cool, I think, and seems like still a great organization. A lot of the same people are involved. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, I want my kid to like learn all this stuff, but I don't think I want to join Boy Scouts, I would definitely look into Trail Life, just because I know that that's an alternative. But it still doesn't hold that same weight. You got the whole like Eagle Scout thing. That was like such a very, very stronghold thing and very set, rigid boundaries, and it had such legacy attached to it.
Like a pinnacle of a milestone.
It really is, and it's there was tradition behind it. There was a lot of adult leaders in my troop that were proud to be Eagle Scouts from back in the day, and there was like lineage and heritage to it that now is just kind of unfortunately tainted.
Yeah, I know. I'm more proud of my Eagle Scout than I'm proud of my high school diploma.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I don't. And my high school diplomas got through a GED, so I really didn't. I didn't do anything for it. What were some of your favorite merit badges? What did you enjoy doing the most?
Merit badges that I enjoyed. Honestly, I'm trying to think. I liked like the survival type stuff, just because that's so like
the
badass.
wilderness survival. The wilderness survival was my absolute favorite too.
Yeah,
and I think I also really liked the woodworking stuff because you could build with your hands.
Yeah, I liked wilderness survival just because it was like such stuff that you would like never learn anywhere else. So that was cool. I also liked the like water merit badges, like all the stuff on the lake or whatever.
All the swimming stuff.
Yeah, and like also like water safety stuff. Like I eventually became a lifeguard, so honestly, I feel like that was probably part of the reason why I became a lifeguard, was like I was already like kind of trained in some of that stuff, like CPR and like. Even I remember there's one in particular thing that was really cool with the water safety or whatever. I don't even remember what merit badge was attached to, but it might have even been like survival. But it was like when you're stranded in the ocean or in the lake or something, you could wrap your pants around your neck and turn it into a life vest by pushing air bubbles into the pants and making
smack the water.
You smack the water and make bubbles, and you could fill your pants with air and turn them into like a little balloon almost and make it into a little life vest. And I thought that was really crazy because it's like, holy shit, you can like make your pants. But also, when are you ever going to be on the water wearing long pants?
When we crash, when we're on a plane and we crash into the water and survive.
It's like, I was thinking that the whole time. I'm like, bro, I'm never wearing pants though. Like, so I was always a diehard shorts wearer. So I'm like,
how can I turn
get stranded, I'm fucked.
my jeans into a flotation device.
Yeah, and I guess also my favorite memories from Scouts were also just like playing with fire and shit because I loved playing with fire. And also one time on this one trip, we brought potato cannons and we were just shooting off potato cannons until we got in trouble, and that was amazing. So that was super fun.
Yo, a good potato gun can feel really powerful. Like you can feel.
Yeah. Me and my brother built one from
scratch. Launch that thing 100 yards. You hit that little grill lighter button, and it goes fa-doomp, and it just
Me and my brother, we tried to make one with the little button, but like we somehow we didn't ever get it completely right. So we had one of the kinds where you'd like flick the little flint on it, and that was always super fun too because it was like very if you didn't flick it right.
Hairspray?
Yeah, you use hairspray or Axe body spray. Yeah. Whatever kind of aerosol we could get our hands on. That was another thing about my childhood. My dad owned a Dippin' Dots franchise, so we always had tons of dry ice at our house. So we'd always do dry ice bombs too. That was super fun.
Dude, that does sound like a blast. What age were you when you got your first job? Were you like the typical like 15, 16-year-old, or were you even younger? Or what's your thing?
I worked for my dad like as long as I can remember him having Dippin' Dots. So I guess I was in like 6th grade. So I guess I was 12, 13, 14, probably 13. I would work for my dad. I would also like mow the lawn when I was younger too. I mean, that's not really a job, but my dad would like pay me like $20 or whatever.
And cutting the grass is fun when you're a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I would like listen to my iPod Nano and like jam out while I was mowing the lawn, so that was fun. But yeah, so yeah, and I guess another side note that is kind of interesting. My parents never really let us have like video games, like so we were always just like having to like figure out stuff outside. Like we had like computer games, like we had our PC like at home, like our home computer in our computer room or whatever, and like my neighbor like gave me a Game Boy at one point. Room. My neighbor gave me like a Game Boy at one point, so I did have like Pokemon, but yeah, like my parents were always like super, especially my mom, she was always like super adamant about us like playing outside and stuff. So anyways, but yeah, my first job that I can like think of that was a real job would be working for the childcare at church. So like you could work there pretty young, and so like on Saturday nights they'd have like the late service, and then on Sunday morning they'd have the early service and the late service too. So like Saturday night they had a service, and then they had 2 services on Sunday. So I would typically work the like Saturday night service, and I would like just watch kids or whatever, and I got paid minimum wage for sure. Like it was so little, but that was like the first job that wasn't working for my dad. But my dad owned a Dippin' Dots franchise, so like I was basically like an ice cream scooper at festivals and at the mall and things like that, and I did that pretty young, and that was like a proper job because I mean I was handling money, I was doing customer service, I was having to talk to people, get them the right thing, deal with angry people, all that kind of stuff, getting tips. So like it was that was like the first job that I had. And then after I did the childcare thing, I ended up working at the camp that was at my church, and I worked there like every summer for a long time. So those were like proper jobs as well. But yeah, that was like my first. That was like my first proper job where I had like a W-9 and like all that kind of stuff, or W-2 and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think that job is what got you comfortable around kids so that you felt like you could take your future jobs?
Yeah, for
being
sure.
an au pair overseas?
100%. That definitely comes in later, and we'll have to talk about that for sure. But yeah, when I was like 21, I got a job as an au pair overseas, and like one of the big requirements that a lot of families want you to have is experience dealing with kids. And that was my main experience for sure, was like babysitting my neighbors too. That was another thing I forgot about. I babysat my neighbors quite a bit. So like I had experience watching kids there, and then that's kind of how I got the job at church, I think, because you had to like kind of have some experience working with kids. But in that environment, at least you're with other people. It's not like you're just one-on-one with a couple of kids. And then like I said, I worked at that camp for a long time. So I had a lot of experience working with kids, and that was the main thing. And then also a lot of au pairs want you to have references from people. So I had like references from the camp who like wrote references about me, and I had my scout leaders write references about me. And that was another thing that actually helped me get that job, was the fact that I was a Boy Scout. A lot of the parents that I talked to really liked that, because they liked the fact that I knew outdoorsy things and survival skill things and how to deal with emergencies and leadership and stuff like that. They really
emergency
appreciated
preparedness
that.
is a huge thing. Yeah. They
Totally.
want to know that you can attend to bruises, scrapes, cuts. If anything goes wrong, you know how to get them to the emergency room. If they, they're CPR, like they're really stoked about that. But we'll
and
dive
then I was
in
a lifeguard too.
Later.
Like I knew, if I was going, a lot of au pairs want you to go play with the kids in the pool. So it was like, I'm also a lifeguard. So it's like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah, so we'll dive deeper into those travels a little bit later, but we're currently on the timeline where we're coming up on like college or like high school graduation / college, like that timeline. So tell me a little bit about that part of your life.
Yeah, so high school was definitely interesting for me because I went from this very, very Christian sheltered school to going to a public school. So that was a very big shift for me, for sure. My private school that I went to, I had like 60 people in my whole class, like my whole grade had like 60 people in it. So I went from that to going to a class of 1,200 at my high school. It was a very big high school. So it was vastly, vastly different. And also at the time, I was very like small and like, I was never like shy. I was always like funny and stuff, but it was definitely just a very weird transition, because I was going from this Christian sheltered environment of very few kids that I've known basically for every single kid for the last 5-6 years, maybe even longer if I knew them through church before I started going to that school, to going to a school where I knew a handful of people. The other thing is a lot of kids, like, they have friends in their neighborhood and stuff like that they're like, okay, yeah, I know this kid and this kid and this kid, and they're going to my school or whatever. But I actually didn't go to the school that I was zoned for because I didn't know anyone going to that school. No, like I literally didn't know a single person going to that school, and it wasn't that great of a school, to be honest. So I had this thing called a permissive transfer where I was able to go to another school in the county as long as I kept my good grades or whatever. So basically they were like, yeah, you can stay because we like kids from this school and blah, blah, blah. As long as you keep your good grades, you can stay. So I knew a handful of people at this new school, but no one from my neighborhood went there. I couldn't take the school bus because like I didn't live in that school district. So I was very like separated too. Like I felt like I was a part of, but at the same time not, because I couldn't engage in the same exact ways that a lot of these other kids could like assimilate. I didn't know anyone in my neighborhood. I couldn't take the school bus. If I wanted to go hang out at someone's house, I would have to have my mom and dad like drop me off somewhere that was slightly more inconvenient for them. I couldn't walk to anyone's houses. You know what I mean? And a lot of these other kids, like they knew their next door neighbor, or they could walk to the neighborhood over, they could ride their bike somewhere. So I always kind of felt like I was kind of friends with everybody, but not like best friends with anybody. You know what I mean? Like it was definitely kind of a weird experience. And over the years of high school, like especially in the beginning, I was actually better friends with a lot of kids from other high schools. Because the thing about going to a private school is all of us break off and we go to our respective high schools that we're zoned for or whatever. So I knew a lot of kids at a lot of other schools from my middle school, but so I would end up going to their football games or whatever. So that was also weird. It was like I was better friends with a lot of these kids at other schools. So my best friends didn't even go to my school. It was weird, but eventually, it was fine. And again, I was like still in Boy Scouts this whole time. So that was another weird thing, because you're in Scouts until you're 18, right? Yeah. So that was another weird thing, like being in high school, but also like still going back to church every Tuesday to like go to Scouts. Like it was just such a weird time in my life, But yeah, that was like the time when I got introduced to, you know, all the worldly things, I guess you could say, in the like Christian mindset of, you know,
the worldly things.
Yeah.
You were exposed to temptation.
Yeah, and it was funny because I remember in particular this one day my principal like sat everyone down on in like 8th grade and was like, statistically, like most of you guys are gonna like smoke weed and like do, you know, drink alcohol and like have sex before marriage and all this stuff, and all of us were kind of like,
and hail Satan. You guys are gonna hail Satan.
And the funny thing was is I remember sitting there being like, not me. You know, like I remember sitting there thinking like, not I, you know, like literally in, you know, like the 12 disciples, like, is it me, Jesus? No. Is it me? You know, one of you will betray me tonight. Not I. Surely not I. You know what I mean? But funny enough, like pretty much all those kids that I can remember sitting next to me, all of us are in a different place mentally.
Well, that's kind of like it's an interesting issue when it comes to growing up in the Christian faith, is that a lot of times they try to protect you from things, but in the long run, in my opinion, it can actually hurt you because you are not exposed to things early enough to have like a conversation in your head about like if it's okay or if it's not okay or if it's moral or it's not moral. You're basically told what's good and what's bad. You never get the option to figure out what's good or what's bad.
I mean,
so
a great example of that is having the drinking age be 21 in America. It's so stupid. Like in a lot of other countries, you can buy beer when you're like 16. So it's just not even special at that point. It's like you have a beer with your parents or whatever. You have a beer like, you know, when you turn 16, like, oh, whoop-de-doo, I drank a beer. And with beer,
have like wine with dinner or something.
Yeah, and like with beer, you can't even like, it's very hard to get blackout drunk without trying. And with like hard liquor, you don't have to try that hard to get blackout, especially when you're like 16. Like you can drink like a few shots and be like really messed up. So I think, yeah. So, but the whole point of that is like, if you just say like, no, you can't do this thing. The only thing you're going to want to do is that thing. Cause it's like the one thing that you can't do, but it's like everyone that's older than you is allowed to. So it's like, okay, what the fuck? So when you're in the Christian faith and you're like, telling these kids like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, and then you go to high school and all these kids are doing it and having the best time ever and saying how fun it is and always talking about it in class and, you know, talking about the parties they went to and stuff, you're like, okay, I'm obviously missing out on something here because it sounds like they're having fun. So yeah, I remember like that was like the first time I remember the first time I ever smoked weed. That was hilarious. I remember the first time I ever drank. That was really funny. I mean, I'd have like sips of stuff, but I remember the first time I ever like drank was like junior year. I remember me and these kids it was after our AP government test or something, so we didn't have to go to like class. We just had to like go to this testing facility, and then we had the rest of the day to do whatever we wanted. So it was like noon or whatever, and we went back to this kid's neighborhood. This one kid had filled up like a Gatorade bottle with like all kinds of random alcohol that he just stole from his like parents' liquor cabinet. Like it was like disgusting. It was like Malibu and like, you know, whiskey and like, you know, just literally any kind of alcohol. You would drink it. It was so disgusting, but it would like get you drunk. And it was just so funny because I'm like, this is disgusting, but like, sure, I'll try some. Like, it was just so funny. And yeah, that was a weird time in my life. But yeah, high school ended up being fun. I enjoyed it. But like I said, I think I never really had anyone that I was like all my best friends went to other schools. And that was another thing, is I was still really involved in church at the time and Young Life and things like that. So I would still interact with a lot of kids from other schools in that area that were, you know, closer to my church and stuff. But I was then going to this other high school where I still had friends, but it wasn't like my best friends were there.
Yeah. In one of your more popular, and I think it's actually the most popular YouTube videos, is the Why I Dropped Out of College video.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to why you went to college, and then I want to hear the story about how you dropped out. And for those of you that really want to know the in-depth story, go watch the video. He made the video so he would stop having to explain it to people.
Yeah, the video was also kind of a sales pitch too. So I mean, whatever. I think I'll probably.
Oh, was it? Was it a Vima pitch at the same time?
Yeah, kind of. It was a little bit because I was basically that was kind of the strategy. So I'll actually kind of back up a second because it was funny because in high school I was always involved and before that I was always like super into like art and stuff like that. Like in middle school, I loved art. In high school, I took art class every semester. Like that was an elective. You didn't have to take an art, but I always took an art, like a physical medium art or even digital. One semester I did take a digital class, and that's the only formal Photoshop training I've ever had. It was pretty much all Photoshop class. We didn't really deal with anything else. But that's actually really funny because some of that stuff that I learned in that Photoshop class I still use every single day to this day. So it's really funny, actually. A lot of this stuff is in parallel. And that was one thing I did want to bring up was even back then, I still loved doing like random little computer like animations or, I would open up, since I didn't have Photoshop, I'd open up like Microsoft Paint and like make some goofy thing with like a picture that I took on my shitty phone or, whatever.
You're going to have to put some of those into the podcast group on Facebook.
They're all on my face.
I've seen some of these before and they're hysterical.
Yeah, some of them are pretty funny. A lot of them I made in like high school and stuff like that. Some of them are just so cringe. It's not even funny, but yeah, so I was always into that kind of stuff, I guess. And I think when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for college, pretty much everyone in my school wanted to go to UGA or Georgia Tech. Like those are the two main ones if you were staying in state. And University of Georgia was definitely my main pick. It seemed like the most fun. I was always like, even though I didn't really have any connections family-wise to UGA, like I was always a Georgia Bulldogs fan and all that kind of stuff. So I just like really wanted to go there. And I didn't even really know exactly what. I was thinking something along the lines of like marketing. Somewhere in the back of my head, I always thought it'd be cool to make like commercials or something. Like that was always like I was always like, I think it'd be fun to make commercials. When I was growing up, I used to do like those surveys a lot or like focus groups where you'd have to like go into a room and like talk about products with people.
The cinnamon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a crazy story. But I loved going in those focus groups because I thought it was so fun to like talk about products and stuff, and I was getting paid to do it. If you have never done a focus group or a survey, you should sign up on like just Google like surveys or focus groups in your area.
And you make a couple $100 just for hanging out and answering questions.
Sometimes even eating food. Like you literally take, a couple, an hour and a half or whatever. You sit down and you talk about stuff. You eat food. And then the focus groups are the most fun because it's almost like a classroom environment where you're like talking and discussing and debating about certain things, which I like. But anyways, so I always thought it'd be fun to like get into something like that because I enjoyed that. And I, at some point, realized like that'd be kind of a fun thing to do. But I didn't exactly know how or even what career path or what major or anything that was down. And also my parents never like pushed me towards a certain major or anything. It was always just like go to college. Like it wasn't really anything in particular that they were like, go be a doctor. They never pushed anything like that on me, but it was just like, go to college. That was the main thing. And so when I didn't get accepted to the University of Georgia, my second option was Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, Georgia. And that was kind of a school where a lot of kids that didn't get accepted to UGA would end up going. It was still in state. It was still fun. It was still cool. Same kind of vibe, but just a lot smaller. They didn't have a football team, so it's like you didn't have as many like big parties and stuff, but like whatever. And it's funny that I even have to mention that, but that's a huge draw for colleges. It's like if you have a football team, you have built-in game days and parties and things that like end up
especially
being
in Atlanta.
A big social aspect. Yeah, I mean, it's like game days are like the biggest days of the year to look forward to, and if you don't even have a football team to have a game day, then you're going to miss out on a lot of social things. And yeah. So anyways, I ended up going to GCSU, and that was...
What degree were you pursuing at the time?
So when you're a freshman, a lot of the classes that you're taking are just like the prerequisites. Like you're probably not even taking any classes for your major yet. But my declared major was mass communications, which is like radio, TV broadcasting, print advertising, like a lot of
YouTube,
things like that.
Podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very funny because that's actually what I ended up doing. But so I guess I knew myself pretty good, even though I wasn't very confident at all at the time. But the funny thing was, due to like a scheduling thing that got fucked up during my second semester, I actually got into my very first mass communications class, my second semester, which most kids don't get into until they're at least a sophomore. So I actually did take one mass communications class. It was just intro to mass comm or whatever. But it was just funny because I remember sitting there like reading the textbook and like learning from, the professor. And a lot of the stuff we were learning about was already like kind of outdated. And I'm like, okay, I get that a lot of the same principles still apply and a lot of things carry over. It's like, okay, you used to have print ads. Now you have banner ads. You used to have, cable TV. Now you have YouTube, so a lot of things do carry over and there's a lot of things that you could still definitely learn. But I just thought it was kind of funny that we were literally like learning about like print and stuff like that. And it's like, dude, like none of us have picked up a magazine or a newspaper in years. Like, what are we doing
colleges, most colleges are like 5 to 10 years behind on everything.
Yeah. And that's just the pace of, knowledge and learning. And, I think also an interesting thing that's kind of fucked up, but also like interesting is a lot of professors write their own textbooks and then force all the students to buy it. So it's like 8th
edition, 9th edition, 12th edition.
The professors, the curriculum's only as behind as the teacher wants to write a new textbook a lot of times, So it's like.
Yeah, and that's what's, I don't want to get on some college rant right now, but like whenever people go to college for like marketing or advertising or entrepreneurship or digital media, I'm like, wrong place to learn. Like you're just learning at the wrong place because you're
learning at the wrong pace and you're learning the wrong stuff because the stuff you're learning, those jobs are already saturated. And once you get out, the only way you're going to get those jobs is when people retire or like, the job is just going to dry up like a lot of times and you got to learn to adapt. And that's the thing is a lot of people won't ever really be out of jobs necessarily because there's always going to be something that replaces the thing that dries up. But the problem is skewing all of your like knowledge base towards this thing that's like not going to even really exist by the time you end up graduating. That's just what's really sad about a lot of this stuff that people don't even realize.
Yeah. What was it that made you like, was there a moment that you had where it was like, oh, this isn't for me? Was it when you went into that classroom and they were teaching you 5-year-old stuff? Or
no, it was.
What was it?
So basically, when I was in my first semester, still, it was around like maybe October of my first semester in college. One of my friends that I knew through, I went to prom with this girl at a different school, and he was in the prom group of that school. And so I knew him vaguely from this one time we went to prom together and like and I went to a party at this like thing. So I barely knew this guy, but I knew that he went to Georgia College and I was friends with him on Facebook. So we were kind of like, became buddies, and he had a younger brother that was my age. So I was friends with him. And anyways, one day he came up to me in the school cafeteria and he started talking to me about this business that was a network marketing type business. It's actually really funny that we talked about that on the last Wheels to Walking podcast. But basically, my mom was heavily involved in a network marketing company growing up called Arbonne that's still around, actually. And I remember when I was younger, I thought that was really cool that she was doing that. And I thought that was something that I could do. But the products were so like focused around like makeup and health and like lotions and creams and stuff, very skewed towards women, that I just never really thought that was like anything that I could do. Because I just thought like, oh, it's like Mary Kay. Like it's all like ladies doing this thing. But when I saw this business, I won't get into it too much, but it was a company called Vima. Basically, they were like a health and nutrition company. It wasn't skewed towards any gender or anything like that. And there was also a lot of young people making a lot of money at the time in it. And it was kind of like a quote unquote ground floor opportunity because it was like just starting to explode and all this stuff. So anyways, I joined the company and I got really, really involved in it. Long story short, I was like even pledging to like be in a fraternity, and like I'm pretty sure one of the reasons why I got dropped from the fraternity was I was like spending too much time working on this business and not enough time hanging out with them. And I even went to the convention in Las Vegas that year. That was crazy. Like I was like 18 years old in Las Vegas with my friends, which is hilarious because you can't do anything in Las Vegas when you're 18. You can't do anything.
You can walk around on the street, basically.
You can walk around on the strip. That's it. And you can walk around in the casino, but like you can't do anything really. And that was a crazy moment for me because it was the first time where I saw people in that business was life-changing for me because it was the first time I saw people taking charge of their own future and doing something for themselves that made me change my paradigm. Like I had a huge paradigm shift about like what's possible, and I saw these kids that were literally making like millions of dollars. I mean, you think about like millions of dollars and you're like, whoa, millions of dollars. But think about even as a kid, like an 18-year-old kid making $10,000 a month, like that's nuts. Like, I mean, that's even sick to like now, like if I was making $10,000 a month, I'd be stoked, and it was just crazy that it was even possible. That's the thing. It's like, it's not even that it was like probable, but that it was possible that I could do.
It's a proof of concept.
Exactly. It was like these kids, and it wasn't just like one kid. I was meeting these people, talking to them face to face. They were teaching me the strategies and the things that they did to get to the point where they were making 6 figures a year in this company as a college student. And so that was what really made me shift my paradigm. I read a bunch of books. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That book changed my life. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. That book also really changed my paradigm. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. A lot of books that were like these self-development books. And I started watching Tony Robbins. I started watching E.T. the Hip Hop Preacher. Gary Vaynerchuk. I read Crush It. Like I literally, when I dropped out of college, I listened to the audiobook of Crush It as I was driving home from college with all my shit in my trunk, knowing that I wasn't ever going back to college. Like that's how crazy this shit was. Like I'm like, people are like somehow like, oh yeah, Gary V, they found him like a couple years ago. No, I was listening to this dude in like 2012. Like I've been a Gary V guy for quite a long time. And it was really interesting just because the reason why I dropped out was I was sitting there one night and I was failing a lot of my classes, to be honest. Like I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't doing anything. And if I wasn't going to pass I take it back. I wasn't failing most of my classes, but I wasn't doing that great. And I knew that if I didn't do well on my finals, I was going to do pretty bad in the class. I knew I needed the finals to bring up my grade in a lot of circumstances, and it's pretty rare that that's going to happen anyways. A lot of times the final is going to bring your grades down. But anyways, I was like sitting there and I'm like, I could either study for all these finals and, not get any sleep and have a terrible night, and I'm still going to probably want to drop out, or I could just say, fuck it, and burn the bridges and burn the ships and basically say, I'm going to go to sleep, and in the morning I'm going to wake up and do terrible in these finals, but I know that I'm not going to come back here. And I remember it was like raining that night, and I went outside and I went to this like train depot thing that was like next door, and I was like writing in my journal. Like I literally had this like journal that I was writing in, and I remember writing. And at the time I was like pretty religious. So I was like writing like a prayer kind of too. And I was like writing like, please like give me a sign or something. I want to like, do what's best for me. I feel like college is like the thing that everyone wants me to do, but it's just like at the end I get a diploma. It's just like a freaking coupon for something I don't even want to do at the end of the day. Like I don't want a job. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to like do my own thing, whatever. So long story short, I decided that night that I was not going to, I wasn't going to do well in my finals. And I had this one class. It was like an Android programming class. Like you had to like make Android apps. And I needed to turn in like all my assignments for the whole year. Like basically you were supposed to kind of, as the semester went on, turn in different projects, but you didn't really have to turn them in until like the last day of the class. And I hadn't done like any of them. Like I had done like 2 out of 10 or something. And I'm such a procrastinator. I was like, oh, I'll just do it at the end. I'll do it at the end. I'll figure it out. I'm smart. I'll be able to program it. I'll copy off someone. I'll do whatever. I don't know. And I didn't do them all. I didn't do them. And I remember it was really humiliating actually, because I had to write like an email to my professor of that class basically saying, because he was like, hey, these are due, right? Like, you're going to fail this class if you don't turn them in, blah, blah, blah. And I kept emailing him like, yeah, I'm going to turn them in. I'm sorry. I have this one, blah, 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 all this stuff. I was bullshitting. And then on the last day I was like, hey, I actually don't have any of these. I never had any of these. I'm dropping out of college. I'm sorry if I wasted your time stringing you along. I'm sorry. And I had this like little robot thing that I had to like program, and I had to like give it back to him because it was the class. It was owned by the school, and I had to go after writing. I had the email like ready, but I didn't send it. And I went to his office, and he was in there. Yeah, and I had to like, and I like slid it behind his door, and he was like, "What was that?" And I like literally like scurried away like a little bitch because I didn't even want to face him. I didn't even want to talk to him or see him or anything. I just like put it. And I like ran, and then I sent that email to him, and I'm like, I'm really sorry.
The old drop and run.
Yeah, and that was weird because then I went home for the summer and didn't tell my parents for like a month.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that you didn't tell them, and it was only until like
they were like talking about,
hey, you gonna sign up for your next semester, and you're like, no, I'm not.
I'm like, about that, nah.
Yeah. So, all right. So where does that lead? I mean, there's a lot of room
so
in
basically
between
I was
leaving
involved
college.
in that,
so what's next?
I was involved in that company for quite a while. I was really hardcore into it. I went to 3 of those Vegas conventions. Was it 3 or 2? I think I went to 3. I went to a lot of meetings. I did a lot of stuff. I lived with friends. I crashed at people's houses for like a month at a time. Like I was just trying to make this thing happen, dude. And like I made money, but not enough to break even, to be completely honest. It was like I was just pouring time and effort and energy into this thing. And eventually I moved to Kennesaw, Georgia, where I lived in a house with this other guy and 2 guys. And we were trying to make this whole network marketing thing happen. And it just never like really took off for us to the level that we wanted it to. And eventually it all came kind of crumbling down. And again, I'm kind of like glossing over a lot of this, but I don't take any of those years for granted, because I learned like so much about business and life. And I learned from mentors and got to meet with people that were making tons of money. And I learned about, investments and, self-development and, talking to people and hosting events and all kinds of stuff. And because when you're running something like that, you kind of have to do it all. Like no one's really making you do anything. No one's forcing you to go out and do anything. So you got to just like make your own schedule. You're working from home. I even had to pick up a job working at Dunkin' Donuts to supplement my income because I just wasn't making enough. And it was a hard year, man. It was weird. But after that, I wanted to do the au pair thing. So I guess we'll kind of talk about that. But I don't know if you had any other questions about the
No, we can transition
stuff.
to that. I got one question. Like you say, it was a hard year and it was like dark and grim. And I think everyone, when they leave college and they step into the job force and if they're trying something new that's exciting, but they still have to take like a day job and they don't got a car, like. I think I remember you telling me one time a story of you like walking to Dunkin' Donuts like in the rain, thinking to yourself like, "How did I get here? Like, what have I made? Have I made the right decision? Like, what am I doing with my life?"
Yeah, dude, that was a hard moment, and it was funny because going into that moment, I kind of knew that it was going to be one of those moments for me. Because I remember
I've had moments where it's like, this is going to be important. Let me just go through this crap that I have to go through. But like, this is going to be.
It was like I probably could have called an Uber, or I probably could have called someone, but I was like, nope, I'm in this situation. I'm gonna do it. And
yeah,
basically,
you're in that situation because of you. So you have to almost like step up and be like, you know what?
Yeah, I'm walking to work in the rain. And basically, I didn't have a car, so I was walking to Dunkin' Donuts, sometimes at 5 in the morning to open the store. It wasn't fun. It wasn't, the only thing that made it redeeming was my coworkers. Working at a place like that, if you have fun coworkers, it can be fun. Because you're almost kind of like going through some trauma together, doing a morning rush while, you're a bunch of just stupid 20-year-olds like trying to.
It's like working at a restaurant. Like there's a bond. Like we all are tortured by.
And you're all being tortured by the customers.
Yeah,
it's totally true, man. And like, you know, some of those mornings were the worst, and people had breakdowns, and people, you know, got yelled at, and people, you know, whatever. But it all ended up, you know, we always had a silly goose time. You know, it was me and my stupid fucking coworkers that were always cutting up and, you know, listening to goofy music or whatever the case might be, and always making each other laugh and just goofing around. So that made that job bearable and fun. And eventually I became like a manager there, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, when I left, it was kind of funny because I was like moving away, and the guy was like, "Why are you quitting?" I'm like, "Because I'm moving." And he's like, "Well, we can transfer you to another location." I'm like, "Bro, you think this is my long-term plan? Like, I don't give a fuck about working here. Like, no, I do not want to work here anymore. Like, there's nothing
we can
you
transfer
say.
you to one of our Italian locations." And you're like, "No."
Right? Yeah. They do have Dunkin' Donuts there. But actually, it's funny. They changed their name to just Dunkin' now. It's not Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, because they do so much more than
Yeah,
donuts.
and it's funny because coffee makes up such a vast majority of their revenue. Like, donuts are such an afterthought at this point. And if you
It's
look at their
also kinda
logo, their
like-
logo is a coffee cup. It's not a donut.
Mhm.
It used to be a donut.
Yeah, it's
But
also
anyways.
like Domino's Pizza is not called pizza anymore. It's just called Domino's. 'cause
Yeah, it's
they
just
do more than
Domino's, not
pizza.
Domino's Pizza. Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah.
Um,
So how did you get the opportunity to be an au pair? Like that's the next step in this journey, right?
So basically, yeah, my friend Brooke, she did it, and I don't even I think a friend of hers did it. So she saw that, and she was like, okay, well, I can do this. And basically, for people listening, an au pair is like a nanny that lives with you and takes care of your kids. And so basically, my friend Brooke, she lived with this Italian family in Milan, and they gave her a place to stay. She actually had her own like separate little apartment. So she had a place to stay, and she got a little bit of money every week, and on the weekend she had off, so she could like go to visit other countries or, you know, just go hang out in the city or whatever. And it just sounded really cool. And I remember I was like talking to her one day on WhatsApp or something, and I was like, your life right now seems so cool. I'm so like jealous of you. I want to do that. That seems awesome. I wish I could do that. And she's like, you could do that if you wanted to. And it's funny. I remember the exact place that I was at. I was in the basement of my townhouse. I was doing laundry in the basement of my dingy ass townhouse. And I remember having this conversation with her and hearing the voice message that she sent to me. She's like, I've actually met a bunch of guy au pairs that are here. You can be an au pair and be a guy. Because I just thought it was like a girl job. I'd never heard of any guys doing it. And after I heard that, I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you can totally do it. I've met a couple guy au pairs. Like, they just have families with boys, and they, you know, do the au pair thing just like normal. And I was like, that's crazy. I never thought about that. So when so I basically started applying. I moved back home with my parents. I was like, I want to do this thing. I didn't want to re-sign with my lease. So for like a couple months, I lived with my parents. And at that point, my brother had gone off to this boarding school, 15-month boarding school. So he was out of the picture. So like that was one of the reasons also I didn't want to live at home, was because my parents and my brother were always fighting, my dad and my brother especially. So I did not want to live at home at that point. And even if it was going to save me some money or whatever, it wasn't worth it. So that's also another reason why I was living in Kennesaw with these other guys. But anyways, so my brother was out of the picture. So I was like, okay, fine. I can live at home, and I can save a little bit of money right now. And also, we were going through a weird transitionary time with our business and all this stuff. And one of the main roommates had moved out, and it was just like not the same situation. So I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going to do this au pair thing. And, so I started applying on this website. It's called aupairworld.com. You don't need to go through an agency. You don't even need to pay any money. You just go on there and make a profile, and you basically say, there's a bunch of qualifications, and they say like, what are you looking for? What countries do you want to apply to? You know, what ages do you want to work with? Do you smoke? Do you drink? You know, do you this, do you that, blah, blah, blah. It's almost like a dating profile. You fill it out based on your preferences, and then it actually matches you with families that match your criteria. And then from that point, you can message with them. If you pay for the pro version of Au Pair World, you can get like unlimited applications, or you can send messages before they match with you and all kinds of things. But I never paid for it. I always got the free version, and it always worked. Because the thing is you were only limited to a certain amount of like messages with them. But if they send you their Skype information, then you can just jump off of that platform and then just go on Skype. Like, it doesn't matter. So
not like Airbnb where they just X everything out.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get real creative when you want to get off the platform. Kind of like Craigslist or Spell It or whatever.
FOURZEROFOUR.
And you spell it with like uppercase and lowercase and numbers and symbols, yeah. But anyways, I think we had to do something like that. But anyways, you end up applying and getting on Skype interviews with families, and I think I had a couple before the one that I finally went with the first time. It was like this Italian family. They had 2 little boys. They lived in Milan, and it sounded great. I was like, I've never even been out of the country, really. The only time I'd ever been out of the country was to go to like Mexico for spring break. So it wasn't even like real Mexico. It wasn't like Mexico City or anything. Like, it was just like Cancun, or Cozumel. Sorry, not Cancun. But yeah, and it was my 21st birthday or it was like right after my 21st birthday when I flew out there. And it was funny because I remember thinking like, 21st birthday is supposed to be like this big thing. And then a couple days later I fly out and it's like, woohoo, I'm 21, I can finally drink now. And then you get to Italy and it's like, you could have drank here for years. Like, it wasn't special at all. It wasn't like fun. And, like, it wasn't like American drinking culture. And honestly, I'd already drank in college and whatever. So it wasn't like I hadn't drank. I mean, I just told you I drank in high school. But anyways, so yeah, I lived in Milan for 3 months, or not even in Milan, but this family was really wealthy. They had housekeepers. They had multiple houses. So
Didn't
basically,
the house you stay in was like before they had central air, so they had to like strategically like open and close.
Most houses in Italy are built before that. So like, and a lot of houses, even in like Michigan, bro, a lot of houses don't have AC. They only have heat. I don't know if you know this, but like, I didn't know that until recently. It's like, wait, you're telling me the schools don't have AC? Like, literally, that's a thing. Like, schools don't have AC. That's why they start later, is because the schools are too hot in the summer to start school. So they start like later than us. Like, it's hilarious. And because of like global warming and like all this stuff, now like they're having to like shorten their school year because like it gets too hot in the summer. Anyways, that's a funny thing. But I know there's also a big European audience that listens to our podcast, which is funny. So probably some of this stuff people are gonna be like, we've had AC, blah, blah, blah. But in a lot of Europe, they don't have central AC at all. They only have these little units that are installed by room, basically. So there's like a little AC unit that's like for your room. And then there's another one for the living room and another one. And it's actually very practical because, a lot of times in your house, you're not using most of the rooms. You're probably using like your bedroom and the kitchen mostly or whatever. And a lot of these houses were built a long time ago. So a lot of them are built in a way that was designed for airflow and are very insulated, and they're not so affected by just like the sun and stuff. Like, they stay cooler. So anyways, but in Milan, I was living in like an apartment building. It was in the city. Like, in Milan, it's actually funny. A couple of days ago, they did a live stream with Andrea Bocelli. He sang from the Duomo of Milan. And the Duomo in Milan is like the biggest landmark of Milan. And I lived within 5 minutes walking distance of the Duomo. Like, I could literally
technically like 5 minutes of living next to the Eiffel Tower almost.
Yeah, very, very similar. Like, I could literally just walk right there. I could ride my bike. I could walk. And I would, every day when I got off, I'd walk over to that area. That's where kind of the main city center kind of thing was. And I'd explore and ride my bike.
That's where all the cool cats and kittens were.
Yeah, all the cool cats and kittens. It's pretty touristy. It's a pretty touristy area. That's where also like a lot of the fancy stores. But one of my biggest things is I love to go supercar spotting. And there was a lot of nice Ferraris and stuff like that. So I'd go around, and I had a little segment on my Snapchat story where I would go around. I'd pretend like I was Steve Irwin, and I'd be like, all right, on today's episode of Supercar Spotting, we're going to go see if we can find a Ferrari. And like, I'd go around and I'd be like, I've seen many Californias, but today I'm looking for an F12 Berlinetta. Let's see if we can find one. Like, and I'd go around like literally trying to find like a specific car. It was like one of the fun things I did. And actually, another fun thing that I did when I was an au pair was I had this snap code experiment that I did, where basically on Snapchat, they had this QR code where you could scan it and it would add someone as a friend on Snapchat. They still have this. Instagram has it too now. But I did an experiment where I printed out my Snap code onto physical stickers, like 500 stickers. And basically my idea was just to stick them everywhere I went and see who would add me, just for fun. Like, it was just like, I wasn't trying to be famous or anything. It was just like, who's going to scan this thing? And it didn't have my name. It didn't have any information except for if you knew what it was, you would scan it. And it was so novel at the time that people would actually scan it. Now when you see one, you're just like, oh, it's probably some marketing bullshit. But at the time, it was like a fun thing, and marketers hadn't ruined that yet. So I would go around the city and stick my stickers wherever, and people would add me, and I would share my au pair adventures with, all this weird little audience I had of all these people. And the best place to stick them was in airports, because in airports, you're going to get people from all over the world. You're not just going to get people in your city or whatever. So when I was, going to Italy, actually, what happened? This is what happened. On my way to Italy, I ordered the stickers and they didn't come in time. And so or maybe they did. No, I don't think they did. When my parents came to visit me in the middle of my time there, they brought the stickers because they finally arrived like the day after I left. And so they brought me the stickers, and then that's when I started the experiment. And what was funny is my mom stuck one in the airport before they even got to me, and someone added me from the sticker that she put in the airport. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't even put that one there, and someone added me from like New York or whatever.
What a cool mom.
Yeah. So it was an interesting experiment, and I ended up doing that for like multiple years, and I have like thousands of people on Snapchat because of it.
Was Snapchat your first forte into public video storytelling?
No, I had a YouTube channel, but I never like took off or anything like that. I never when I was younger, I used to make stop motion videos. I used to make like Lego stop motion videos. I would make dry ice bomb videos. I would make videos of my friends, because my first real camera I had was like my first cell phone. So like that was what I used. And it was garbage. It was like 240p, like 5 pixels wide. Like, it was just so bad and so garbage. But my first YouTube channel, I remember like uploading stuff to my YouTube channel. That YouTube channel still exists. Some of the videos are private. Some of the videos are still there if you want to go look. But yeah, I've always been into making videos, but like I never invested in like a real camera or anything like that. It was always just like for fun, goofing around. But me and my friends were always like filming stuff or whatever, and most of the time I was like putting it on Facebook just because that's where my friends were. But sometimes I'd put stuff on YouTube, and so that was like kind of my first thing. But Snapchat was definitely the first one where I took it like seriously, because Snapchat stories were brand new. Again, I was like coming off this Gary V kind of style thing. I wasn't doing the network marketing stuff anymore. I was going on this cool adventure that I'd never left the country before. So it was just a perfect storm for me to like share this stuff. And actually
document
a lot of
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people really enjoyed it. Like, a lot of people thought it was really cool. And I think now it'd be a little more cringe, because it's like, whatever. But I made it fun. I made it cool. Watching some of those stories back definitely makes me cringe, just of how like silly I was being, but I was having fun with it. And like, I was in the middle of, sometimes I was in the middle of nowhere, like, cause I wasn't always in Milan. We would sometimes go to the countryside and like stay in one of their houses on the farm. And like, I'd be in the middle of bumfuck nowhere for 2 weeks. So the only like connection I had was like my Snapchat friends and stuff.
Yeah. Was it when you got back from Italy is when you started podcasting, or was there a gap?
It was after
Spain
there? Actually. So I did it twice. So I did it once in Italy, and then when I came back from Italy, I just got like a day job. I was working at the gym, and then when I got back, and then I also started working at the escape game place. So I worked at like an escape room place for a while, and I went to Spain. And when I came back from Spain, I was still working at the escape game place, but that's when I started like doing the podcast, and that's when I met Kat, and that's when I met you. And that's when I, started, doing this whole venture of video and all that stuff. So that was all after the au pair stuff for sure. But the au pair thing, like, definitely changed my life. If anyone's young and looking for something to do during the summer, I would highly recommend being an au pair. The other thing that's interesting is you can go, well, right now, it's a terrible time for it, but don't go to Italy. But the thing about it is you can go to these, there's like this thing called the Shenzhen Agreement or Schengen Agreement, something. Shenzhen, I think. Shenzhen Agreement, where basically all the countries in the EU, not all of them, but a lot of them, you can look up what the Shenzhen countries are, and they will allow you to stay in the country as a tourist or as a traveler for 90 days without needing a visa. So if you want to do the au pair thing for longer than 90 days, you have to apply for a work visa and say you're officially working for them. But if you do it for on a travel visa, you don't. If as a United States citizen, you don't need you need a passport, but you don't need a travel visa. You don't need anything really. You can just go. And then the thing about it that makes it legal is the money that they're paying you is just like pocket money. It's not money that you're supposed to be like taking home as income. It's just money to go out, to go, have a drink, to go hang out with friends, maybe to go on a train ride to somewhere or whatever. It's not real. You're not going to make a ton of money as an au pair. The main thing is that you're getting is the experience of going to these countries, and you're getting free room and board. They're paying for your meals that you eat with them. They are paying for a place for you to sleep and stay. So as long as you're staying with them. So it's definitely worth it. It's an amazing experience. You get to have another family take you in. That's a very unique way to experience a country, to be literally taken in by locals into their homes. You get to eat the way they eat, learn, how they act, how they dress, how they do their daily routines. It's just a cool thing to be a part of.
And didn't you say that one of the things that you had found the most beneficial about traveling was that you could find out who you really were? Like you didn't feel like you had to act a certain way around anybody, that you could truly and fully be yourself. Like you never had to feel like a parent was watching or a friend was watching or a coworker was watching. You could just be Andrew.
That's a great point. I kind of forget about that because that was something that really hit me hard, especially in Italy when I was walking around the Duomo area, even because I remember just sitting there and I'm like, no one knows who I am. No one has any expectations of who I should be. No one knows what I'm doing unless I'm posting about it. If I was to go do something, no one would know that I did it. It was just very liberating because prior to that point, you have to think there's not very many times, I was only 21. There's not many times before that time in your life where you're like really alone and like by yourself and, without anyone that knows you. Like you said, it just gives you massive perspective because you can redefine yourself. You talk about it a lot with spinal cord injury. It's like after you get hurt, you can kind of come back and be whoever you want to be because you're different now. Like you're using a wheelchair, you're navigating the world in a different way. People are going to start to treat you different and perceive you different. So you might as well change the things you want to change at that time because you can. And people don't get that opportunity ever. Most people don't ever get the opportunity to completely change who they are. And yeah, that was one thing that really changed for me was like, you go to Italy, I went to Italy and I had these conceived notions of who I was and who I should be. And you come back and you realize there's certain things that you want to leave behind, or there's certain things that you want to change about yourself, or even the way that you dress or the way that you act, or you just get massive perspective and you get a lot of empathy and you get a lot of, I think another thing is like not to get too philosophical with it, but like as a white person in America, like you don't face that much like other feeling. Like you don't really feel that much other. You know what I mean? Like you don't really feel like an outcast or like a not included, or you don't feel you
that
feel
can
a part
happen,
of.
but it doesn't feel that way on a societal level.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. And it doesn't feel that way on a societal level. It doesn't, you can feel those things. You can feel those thoughts. I know that you've had that experience, with like being homeschooled and live, kids that went to school versus you, or, you know, kids in your neighborhood versus you. There's a lot of ways that you can feel that feeling. But I'm just saying from a personal standpoint, I never really had those feelings that often. I definitely felt them at my high school. Sometimes, you know, coming from the private school to the public school, you know, my high school was very diverse. I'm super thankful for that. It was about like 30% Hispanic, 30% white, 30% black, and then like 10% Asian, Indian, whatever. So it was very diverse in that way, which was awesome because I got a lot of, I was able to break down a lot of those like barriers in my head. And one thing about traveling internationally is like, even though you end up like, you know, I'm walking around Italy, I don't look that out of place. I mean, I don't look Italian, but like, I'm not super other, but then I start to have a conversation with someone and immediately you're like, oh, this guy doesn't speak Italian. Or like, you feel so like disconnected even by something so simple as language. And then it just really gets in your head about like, well, people are looking at me this way just because I can't speak the language, but actually have so much more to offer. But like they're only perceiving me. They think I'm dumb because I can't speak it, or, you know, like all these things. Like, do they think I'm stupid? Do they think I'm weird? Should I try to speak Italian? Should I not? Like, you know, it's just like so weird, you know, and you get in your head about these things. And I think it gives you a lot of empathy and perspective towards people in minorities, or, you know, people that are dealing with other issues or whatever, because you get a taste of, you know, some of those things. And I would encourage everyone to like do some sort of like solo traveling thing, because even when you're traveling with like one friend, you can still gain a lot of that. But like when you're really by yourself, it can be like lonely and hard and stuff, but it really forces you to get out of your comfort zone and like do things that you wouldn't necessarily want to do even. But you learn a lot, and yeah, it gave me a lot of perspective. And it's just weird. It's just a trip, like even just being somewhere else. You're like, everyone that I've ever given a shit about, everyone that ever has given a shit about me is over there on this other rock across the ocean, and I'm over here. And it's just a trip, you know? It's almost kind of like when, you know, think about the first astronauts that like went into space and they look back down onto this freaking blue marble, and everything they've ever cared about, everyone they've ever known, anything they've ever even considered was down this little blue marble, and they're looking at it from above, you know? That's a trip. And that's kind of on a small scale how I felt, you know, because it was like, whoa, I'm a fish out of water, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely a really cool perspective. I think that a lot of people could have a lot of benefits to traveling alone, and, you know, having the opportunity to be an au pair, and I think that's pretty cool. So let's fast forward a little bit into today. What was your first forte into video making that is at least kind of professional?
Like, I think it would kind of come from, like I said, kind of just watching a lot of video creators. Like, that really like inspired me. And then the Snapchat thing, I really learned a lot about storytelling, like you said. Like, I learned how to kind of like craft a story in a certain amount of 15-second chunks or 10-second chunks. You realize like how much is just bullshit and how much like you really need to tell the story. Like, you know, even Vine, like I loved Vine. I made some Vines. I, you know, it never got popular or anything, but like even Vine, it's like you're trying to convey something in 7 seconds. You got 7 seconds. You can maybe fit 3 scenes in there, maybe 4, you know, like that's pushing it. So you know, those types of things really helped me into the mindset of that. And then when I came home from Spain, the second time I did the au pair thing, which, by the way, they're an awesome family. I consider them like my second family. They're great. I've gone back and visited them. They're in quarantine right now. But they somehow I had a I remember. I went to this like conference where this guy Ryan McGinn, who I'd watched for a while, he actually had this conference where he taught people how to make like vertical videos for your Snapchat or for Instagram stories and stuff like that. And that wasn't the main thing about the conference, but that was one of the things. And he encouraged everyone to like go home and buy a GoPro session and just like make Instagram stories with that. because that was what he did, and that is like how he taught, and I did it. I was like one of the few people that actually took massive action and like did it. And he was like, just go make videos, make a video every day, make a 15-second story about your day every single day. People will think you're cooler than you really are. Like, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, it was just really funny because he's like, the thing about it is perception is everything. Like, you don't even have.
Perception is reality.
Yeah, perception is reality, because it's like, you don't have to be anything that you're not. But the thing is if you can make people think that you are this thing that you want them to think, eventually you'll kind of become that thing. It's like fake it till you make it sort of deal. So it's like, if you want people to think you're like this whatever, you know, I'm not telling people to fake their life or, you know, make Photoshop their photos and like, well, if I make my butt bigger in my photos, eventually I'll have attraction, I'll have a bigger butt. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But the thing that I am saying is like, you gotta eventually, if you want to do like video, you gotta like hone your craft and make a bunch of videos. I mean, I've made hundreds of videos at this point, and actually I downloaded Ableton this weekend, which is like a music software.
I heard it was on sale, like a huge sale, like $60 for the whole program.
It's monthly, I think. So it's, I don't know, but I don't think that's the same thing. I don't know. But Ableton Live, you can do a free trial anyway. So I had the free trial, and it was just funny because I was like, I don't want to like fuck around with like making beats and like making music or something. And I downloaded it, and I downloaded some sample packs and stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is like way harder than I thought it would be. Because I'm like, oh, I know how a timeline works. I like mess with music. I mess with songs and videos a lot and like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is way harder. And I think about the first time I ever opened up Photoshop, I was so intimidated that I like immediately just like closed it and like went back to Microsoft Paint because it was like easier. You know what I mean? It's like the same thing. You open up Premiere for the first time and you're so intimidated and you're just like, holy shit, this is a lot, and you just close it, or you just like do your one little thing that you try to do and then you eventually close it. But
yeah, I feel like that with my script writing software right now. I got some script writing software, and I opened it up, and I was like, don't know how to do any of this. So I just like played around for a few minutes, and I was like, let me just close this.
But I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I never took any like classes on Premiere. I never took any classes on Photoshop except for that one in high school. And it was funny because a lot of the stuff in high school I already knew how to do because I had already had a pirated version of Photoshop on my computer at home. But like, it was just funny because I'm just like, you know what? This is something that I could put a lot of time into if I really want to, or it's something that I could just stop doing. But if I think I could be good at it, which I think I could, like it could be something like video editing where you just have to start at square one and you can get better at it, but you got to like put a lot of time into it. And so to go back to your question of where I got started, it was because I went to that conference with Ryan, that I figured out how to make these little vertical stories. I had a GoPro. Because the other thing is you feel like such a poser making videos with your phone or something. Because you're like, what am I doing? Like I'm just like anyone else making a dumb video on their phone. But then at the same time, you don't want to go put $800 down on like a camera if you're not even really sure that you're going to be into this or like you're going to use it properly or anything like that. So it's just like, you got to like, you know, start somewhere. And that was the somewhere for me. And luckily at the time I'd already started my podcast. So I was able to kind of like tie those things together a little bit. Like I've got the podcast and then I'm also doing these little stories at the same time. And basically, eventually, our friend Kat Sarmiento, you can go listen to the podcast I did with her. I've done 2. She eventually was like, you should make videos for me. I want you to make ads for me. You know, I want you to do this, this, and this. And eventually I bought like a camera and, you know, kind of started working with you with that first camera. And the rest is kind of history, I guess.
Yeah, so where in the timeline after you did the vertical video thing did we meet? And
I was still doing it at the time when we did our first podcast because I made a vertical video in your studio when we met the first time.
With the GoPro, you did, yeah.
Yeah, while we were recording and after we were recording, I made a little video. And the funny thing about that is I think we didn't really like hang out or anything that much after that podcast. Like it was like a few months probably.
No, I got your number. We hung out, like we DM'd back and forth or whatever, but it wasn't until I kind of linked up with Kat, and I knew what I wanted to do with.
How did
with
that
Wheels to
happen, by
Walking.
the way? Because I think we were hanging out a little bit, and then I introduced you to her.
You introduced me to Kat, yeah. And
At
so
her,
I
did we go to her house or something, or what happened?
can't remember, to be honest. But somehow, some way, I think it was your birthday party, actually. I met her the very first time at your birthday party.
That's cool.
Met her and Gabe at the birthday party.
That was a cool moment.
And then so we kind of got to talking and chatting, and like I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I needed help setting it up. So I like went to go to Kat, and Kat was like, "Okay, well, what else do you need?" And I was like, "Well, I need this, 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 and this." And she's like, "Okay, well, what you're looking for is what Andrew does, and what Andrew's looking for. So maybe you should try to find a way to work together." And you know, we started talking some more, and then you, me, and Kat all started talking, and then like. I've told this story from my side 100 times, but I'd be interested to hear your story of like how that all unfolded.
Yeah, I was still working my day job at the escape game place at that point. And I'd been working there for a couple years now. And I remember I was trying to quit because I wasn't even working Wheels to Walking stuff, but I was doing other podcast things for other people. Like I was helping a couple people launch podcasts. I was doing other videos for like, you know, clients that, you know, just random shit, you know, like, oh, well, yeah, this guy needs a video. I can make him a little promo video, or this guy needs this. I can make this, and it was all just a complete side hustle. It wasn't anything super formal, but Kat helped me solidify my business into being something more real. And she helped me make, you know, something that was more legit. She helped me come up with a product offering for the podcast stuff. And that eventually kind of fizzled after we started working together, just because I wasn't pursuing the podcast stuff as hard anymore. But
well, you were doing your podcast. You were doing podcast consulting. You were also doing gifts. And
that was later. That was way later. The gifts were way later.
And then you were working with me, so you had like 4 things on your plate, and then you had some other projects lined up in the back burner, and I feel like it was slowly but surely Wheels to Walking kind of took over. Yeah,
for sure. Like basically once we started working together, Kat was like, "Andrew, you said you want to make this much money and then you can quit your job, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then she's like, "And Richard, you're looking for this type of person who can do this, this, and this, right?" And you're like, "Yeah." And it was like,
and I have this amount of money I can pay too. So
yeah, and it was like, okay, this would be stupid for you guys not to work together, because Andrew wants to quit his job and he wants to be paid this much. Richard has this much money to pay and he needs this person. So like, duh, like it just made sense.
And it's also cool because like we were already friends. All 3 of us were friends, and I knew like the whole studio story, which you can tell the whole studio story, but like. You had been searching for a studio, and I had a room available, and I kind of approached you, and then I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, basically, I always wanted a studio to record in, and
because you wanted to have the video element, right?
I always knew that the way that it was going to progress, like my biggest inspiration was like Joe Rogan, and basically Joe Rogan, I knew that eventually I wanted to get to the point where Joe Rogan, he came in. He was able to go into a studio that he always had. He always did every interview in person. You know, he has the guests lined up. They come to his place. It's all set up. He's got his, you know, producer there that, you know, does all the sound and video and everything, takes notes during it. And then at the end, it all gets clipped up, chopped up into clips, and then it gets put online. And like, that's exactly what we ended up building. And I did not think that I was going to get to that point that early on, because I was only at like 100-ish episodes, 110 episodes or something when we eventually had the studio, and then eventually, or it was like 105 or something. And then eventually I brought on AJ, and AJ was my producer for episodes like do you remember what the first episode you worked on? 115 with Ed Bolian?
I started at Ed Bolian's,
which was like 115 or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't even edit it. I was just there to help out, and then it just kind of progressed into me, you know, kind of taking over.
Yeah. And so basically AJ was my producer from like 115 to 130 or whatever. So it wasn't even that many, like, because in the beginning I was cranking out so many, but I think the video element really just slowed things so much down. And then at that point, it was like I'd already talked to so many people and so many guests that I was like kind of running out of people almost a little bit. Not in the sense that I didn't have people I wanted to talk to, but they just weren't local. You know what I mean? I couldn't get them to Atlanta without like flying them or something. And I just straight up like don't have the budget for that. So anyways, that was kind of like what happened is we started working together. And then around that same time when AJ got brought on, that's when we were doing Wheels to Walking stuff like pretty much full time. Well, we were doing it full time and we'd already started cranking out videos. I don't know if we like officially fully launched, but we were
working behind the scenes for like our very first video we ever shot was on September 11th, 2017.
Wow. 2017, jeez.
No, 2018.
I don't know. I think it might have been 2017.
No, it's 2018 because we launched in 2019. It's 2020 right now. So yeah, it was 2018. Yeah. I remember it was when I was wearing the y'all shirt. You had just got your little like Zoom, your little like camera thing.
Yeah, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But either way, yeah, it just all evolved from there. And now basically the Wheels to Walking podcast, we were podcasting for a whole year, all of 2019 and really a little bit of 18. I think we did shoot that in 2017, dude. I don't know. Anyways.
We'll look up this.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe you are right. I don't know. I can't think about it. But anyways, so we were podcasting in secret, basically, on Patreon for a whole year. And then we kind of had this moment where we were like, the Andrew Deitch podcast is gotten to a point where it's taken like a back burner to everything else that's happening with Wheels to Walking. We're already doing a Wheels to Walking podcast every week. Why don't we just make that Wheels to Walking podcast our main podcast, put the Andrew Deitch podcast on hold for quite a while, and just go from there? And so basically we just took the main skeleton of the Andrew Deitch podcast, completely reskinned it with the Wheels to Walking podcast, and here we are today.
Yeah. So for those of you that or for those that don't know, give them a rundown of what your job is, right? Like what your role is here at Wheels to Walking. Because gosh. I think it was originally like, oh, this is my producer. He shoots and edits my videos. But it is grown into so much more than that I feel like you have like a director. You're like a co-writer. You do like all the visual graphics. You like build websites. You like do some editing stuff. You like audio. Like it's hard for me to even like.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of just like everything that you see with Wheels to Walking. I probably had a hand in it at least. Yeah, or if not visual. All of it. Pretty much all the visuals, and audio really. But except for like Instagram stories and stuff, you do those on pretty autonomously. But yeah, I would say I'm probably kind of like creative director or I don't know. AJ, what do you think I would be called?
I would say you're like a producer / creative director.
Yeah, that's
because a producer is very much just in control of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the way I see it is like this. So like Wheels to Walking in itself is a complete and entire business. And I have every single role in that business except for all the visual creative stuff, which by the way is more than half of it. So it's like
it is a media business after all.
Yeah, so it's like we are a media business, and it's like I do all of the stuff that you don't see. He does all the stuff that you do see, and then there are a lot of stuff that we do together as well.
And I mean,
both in the don't see space and in the do see space.
Yeah, and like when it comes to decision making, like I'm definitely a big part of that, and like. Discussions, like we have a lot of business discussions about what we should and shouldn't do as far as sponsors or merch stuff or, collaborations, all kinds of stuff. And like when we're making videos, I'm pretty heavily involved in the writing and scripting process and, making, changes. Like, when we're recording, I'll say, oh, why don't you talk about this thing in your life? Or, because I think we just know each other so well that it's very easy for me to get in your head and know what the audience needs to hear from you sometimes even when you don't realize it, or, things like that, where it's like, yo, talk about this experience that you had with this. And you're like, oh yeah, that time. Or, I think it's weird because people that we've done collaborations with, they're like, you sound exactly like Richard right now.
It was my favorite when we were at Allie's house.
Yeah.
And we were in the kitchen and we were running over lines because we were trying to figure out what our openers and stuff was going to be. And she was like, wow, you two sound exactly the same right now. And it's like, because we are, basically. I'm like, I'm the one who says it on camera, but he's behind the camera, like, giving direction and criticism and guidance and feedback. And it's like, it's perfect because, like, we, like that ancient saying goes, like, iron sharpens iron. And it's like, we very much are similarly driven and similarly focused. And, I think one of my favorite things about our relationship, and honestly, some of my favorite parts about my relationship with pretty much anyone that I have, is like the ability to debate and argue topics, even if they're like mean. It's like, because we're doing it because we both want to put out a really good product, not because we're insulting the other person.
Yeah.
Like, in no way, shape, or form are we like taking it personal and beating each other down. It's the fact that like we're trying to make the best version of something we can, and the way to do that is to rip it apart and make the other person argue and fight as to why they think it's correct, and then kind of this back and forth thing. And like, I think about all my other like business relationships or even personal relationships. Like, I love that dynamic. It's
totally
one of my favorites.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one thing that you're definitely a bigger part of in Wheels to Walking is like managing those business relationships with a lot of the people that we're working with and collaborating with and things like that, or future collaborations. And but yeah, I'm
really good at like relationship building and planning, and like community, and decent at writing. Like, I have my own strengths, but a lot of my, it's hard because it's like, if we imagined like Wheels to Walking was a business without a media side to it, I would be I would be doing everything. But because it's a business that's media heavy, I have two people do all my media now, because the only way that I can focus on growing and building and developing and strategizing and planning and relationships and communities and is because I don't have to think about the other stuff.
Yeah, totally.
That I have that privilege, that advantage of having both you guys on my team.
Yeah, and I think to wrap everything up, like, basically that's the whole reason why we started this podcast, is like the Wheels to Walking podcast is our relationship, and like it's our business, it's everything. And I think a lot of people are curious and interested. We've gotten some really cool comments recently about people that are like super loyal listeners and everything like that, and I think that's super special because it's fun to have an audience that like watches your stuff for the content, but it's also really awesome to know that people are listening and watching because of it's just us. Like, people will watch anything that we make just because they like us, and that's really cool.
Yeah, the videos, after like 100,000 views, if it even makes it that far, the usual watch time is like 3 to 5 minutes. Like, it's not a long time, and the podcasts have a much longer watch time, but also a smaller audience too, which is cool because it's like, if you're listening to this right now, you're, over an hour and a half. You're over an hour and a half in. You're a hardcore homie for sure. Like, you're one of the bros. And I was talking to another friend of mine who actually listens to the podcast, even though we're friends like in real life. He's like, dude, I love it because it feels like I'm just like in a room hanging out with you guys, like just laughing and cutting up and having a good time. And that makes me happy to hear. And we got people. I got loyal people on my Instagram. I got loyal people on my Facebook. I got people on my YouTube. But like, I think my favorite people are probably the podcast people, just because I know for me personally, I connect the most with the creators that I have their podcasts to versus creators that I watch their stuff and I'm like, yo, this is cool. I really like this person. I'm watching their videos. I'm into their stuff. I'll like, comment, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, maybe I just don't really care about them. I care what they're making. And,
Totally.
And this is cool because you guys care about us and you care about what we're making, and we really appreciate you, like, top to bottom. You guys are great.
Yeah. Boom. There you have it.
So that's the thing. Okay. All right. So I go, boom. There you have it. All right, guys. Thanks for coming in to the Richard Corbett podcast today. Hope you had a nice time chilling and relaxing. I want to recommend another episode to you that you're really going to like if you like today's episode. And that episode is actually episode 6 of the Wheels of Walking podcast, called Addiction, Depression, and Suicide. Skip forward for the first 35 minutes or so. I don't even remember. If you really want to get into some cool talks about how to rebuild your life and create a new compelling future for yourself.
And go listen to the old Wheels to Walking podcast.
Yeah, go listen to the old Wheels
one's
to
on
Walking
Patreon.
podcast on Patreon. It's $1. You get access to 40+ episodes for $1, and they're wild, dude. There's podcasts we've
They're off
done
the
in
rails.
Airbnbs. There's podcasts we've done in bed. There's podcasts we've done at 4 a.m. Dude, we would just hustle when it came.
When you said we did podcasts in Airbnbs, it sounded like you were about to say we did podcasts in Arabic. I'm like, what? We did podcasts in Chinese and Arabic and Spanish. We were hustling, dude. We were speaking all kinds of shit.
One of my favorite podcasts is when we were in LA. We were in my room. I was in my underwear drinking a LaCroix. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd taken a muscle relaxer, and we were all just looped out of our head,
We were just laying in bed. It was the most ridiculous podcast of all time.
I remember one time you put a pillow over your mouth because you were like, "Oh, does this make the sounds better?"
It probably did.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's wrap this
Boom,
thing up.
there you have it.
Yeah, boom, there you have it. And then we had a blooper at the end. Yeah. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Follow us on places.
Follow some places.